Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex, my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, and we're going to discuss a little bit of, leftover fear from the New York Giants team after Joe Judge's tenure. As we know, he was a very authoritarian type of coach coming over trying to mimic Bill Belichick's style of intensity and consequential, scenarios where in practice guys would mess up and they'd be running laps or push-ups or whatever physical consequence he had in mind for a specific mistake. And it's pretty crazy that the players are still showing signs of fear and being scared after messing up in practice, according to John Feliciano, the Giants' current center. So I want to discuss, the leftover kind of negativity that may be following Brian Daboll into this year and how he's going to iron out these players, the change in culture, the polarizing nature. We're talking about exact polar opposites in style between Joe Judge and Brian Daboll. So I want to discuss that. I want to discuss how these guys and how insane it is that they're still feeling this type of repercussion from having a disciplinary head coach like Judge. So it's kind of crazy to me, Anthony. But before we dive into the good stuff, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing great, and you're right. There is a complete night and day difference between a coach like Joe Judge and a coach like Brian Daboll. They're philosophically completely different, especially in the way that they discipline their players. Now, I was a huge fan of Joe Judge. Many Giants fans were. He won us all over in his introductory press conference, made a lot of promises, and he fell flat on just about every single one of them. He claimed he was this, but he was really that. And that's really disappointing. And Brian Daboll hasn't had that moment yet where he's made a bunch of lofty promises and he's claimed that he's going to, revitalize the Giants and bring them back, similar to how Joe Judge did in his introductory press conference. Instead, I feel like Brian Daboll has really been more reserved and just let his actions do the talking. And he's been very good at kind of just speaking to the media and really facilitating practices that you're already seeing progress from certain players in. He's been very careful with players. He hasn't been pushing them too hard in terms of the guys dealing with the red jerseys and the injuries. I'm sure Kenny Golladay could go out there and start participating in these drills. He got injured almost an eon ago, right? But we're just taking it slow. Taking it easy with Kenny Golladay, taking it easy with Kayvon Thibodeau and Kadarius Toney. No need to rush them back. No need to push them too hard. And I think that was one of the main criticisms, not only of Joe Judge, but even of Ben McAdoo going all the way back. There's been a problem with the Giants where they've had way too disciplinary of coaches who take it way too hard on their players. I know there was that report that came out a couple years ago about Ben McAdoo would have the team run 90% strength practices on Saturdays before games on Sundays. They would run a serious practice and then get on a plane and rest on the plane and then go play the next day. I mean, that's just bizarre to me. That was actually probably worse than anything Joe Judge ever did, but it just shows that there's been a real bad culture existing in the Giants locker room for multiple regimes. This isn't just a Joe Judge thing. It's been a New York Giants problem. And maybe that has a lot to do with the front offices that we've had and the kind of grandfathered in, front office executives that we've had over the last few regimes. But this year, 2022, completely new slate, wiped it out, cleaned the house, new general manager, brand new front office. Joe Schoen even fired a bunch of people post-draft. And, of course, new coaching staff, totally new regime here, and it's a totally different mindset. And honestly, for most of the Giants players, I'm sure, and probably for a lot of the fans, this does feel like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll bring up a classic Michael Scott quote from The Office. If you guys watch The Office, you'll remember this. It's like snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. If I don't remember that from the dinner party episode. Best freaking episode.
The context on that was completely different, though. I recognize
No.
Very
you'll
different.
Listen. You'll hear the context. The context is we keep going through head coaches. Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. And now we have the exact opposite, the anti-Joe Judge. Right, Brian Daboll curating these personal relationships, a family-oriented approach. I talked to Sam Prince the other day. The kid, really good guy. He called the 2022 5th-round pick for the Giants for Kayvon Thibodeau the energetic one. And he was saying he was at practice a couple days ago, and he was like, the energy feels different. The GM, the head coach, they were welcoming me. They were, bringing me into the field to meet the players, having them break down the huddle. And we all fell for the Joe Judge dive in the mud picture, right? We all fell for it, including myself, for sure. I got excited. And I know Anthony was excited too. It was just all fake. It was just media propaganda. And it fooled all of us. He got us good, man. And hands off to hats off to Joe Judge for really fooling us there. And that's not to say he's a bad coach. I just don't think he was ready. And I don't think he properly created an identity for himself that was different than Bill Belichick. I think his mentality and the seriousness and the disciplinary, it was so much like Bill, even though he continued to say he didn't want to be like him. He had his own agenda, his own philosophies. It was eerily similar to what we see. And the difference between Joe Judge and Bill Belichick is one of them's a Hall of Fame head coach that will go down as the best head coach of all time. And the other one was a special teams coordinator who became a head coach and suddenly thought that he could convince players that following this disciplinary, like by the book kind of strategy was going to turn them into a great football team. And ultimately pairing him with Dave Gettleman, the bad drafts, the overwhelmingly exceeding expenditures in free agency it's just not a good actual game plan to build a foundation of a team. And I think that the two drafts that we had under Joe Judge were some of the best we've had in a decade. And that's my honest opinion. Azeez Ojulari, even Aaron Robinson, I think he's going to be a big impact player. Andrew Thomas. We got some very good players when Joe Judge got here. But before that, it was a bloodbath. The mid-rounds, bro, graveyard. Absolutely. Sam Darnold, all those ghosts he was seeing, those were Dave Gettleman draft picks. And now we go into 2022. We have Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeau, some new pieces, and the family feel to this Giants team has returned. And I want to talk about what John Feliciano specifically said about what he's seeing on the practice field, because it's pretty scary. And when I read this, I thought I had to do a double take. I was like, holy shit, this is not good. And basically what he said was, you can just kind of tell people get a little scared when they mess up. No one likes messing up, but like, it's okay. I mean, practice is for making mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you use practice so that you can perfect it in that way in live game situations. You do it at a high level, but you're supposed to make mistakes in practice. You're supposed to learn from that. I don't understand why there wasn't more of a learning culture under Joe Judge's tenure, more or less a consequential culture. That's kind of the best way to put it. Wasn't learning, it was consequential. And now you have Brian Daboll, who is ironing out, the mistakes and, make those mistakes, throw interceptions in practice, keep trying to fit the ball into a tight window, keep trying to, make that play, go the extra inch, be aggressive, because that's where you're going to learn where not to be. Making guys run laps because they made a mistake, looking back at it. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, I bought into it. I absolutely thought it was a good idea at the time, because I was like, these guys are professional athletes being paid millions of dollars, making mistakes and learning from it and being, being punished for that. That should be part of the strategy. But I was wrong. Joe Judge was wrong. I hope to God that Brian Daboll has the right scheme and strategy, moving forward. But, Anthony, when you hear something like this, that there's like, I know it's a mental awareness month, so, I want to be super respectful of that. But the best way, the only word that comes to mind is like it's PTSD from Joe Judge's tenure. And like for the record, I know that's probably not the right word to use. And I respect the fallen soldiers, and, obviously sending hopes and prayers to all the people that are being impacted by actual PTSD. But just for a lack of a better word, that's what the Giants are suffering through right now in terms of just consequential mistakes in practice. Like, that's ridiculous. How is that? Like, when you first hear that quote, what is your initial impression?
I think the players, a lot of them have been conditioned in a certain way to think and practice in a specific manner because of the regime that they were just under. And I think there's always just two schools of thought, right? Do you think you should make all of the mistakes in practice because then you get them out and you don't make them in the games? Or do you think you should make no mistakes in practice because you practice the way that you play? And Joe Judge was practice the way you play. So you don't want to make any mistakes in practice, and you want to make sure that you don't commit any mistakes at any time. And Brian Daboll's kind of like, all right, make your mistakes now, get them over with. So that way, when you're in the game, you know what not to do. And you can argue that Joe Judge had it the right way, just maybe didn't implement it the right way. And then you could also argue that Brian Daboll has it the right way. I mean, both schools of thought have been successful in the NFL. There's the Kyle Shanahan, get the mistakes out in practice. There's the Bill Belichick, practice how you play. There's two different ways that you can play this out. And it's just going to come down to basically execution. At the end of the day, the coach has to execute properly during practice. You can't just expect everyone to fall in line. You have to probably take it player by player as well. Some players probably need to make mistakes in practice. Other players probably need to practice efficiently and not make mistakes in practice. It's like, I think Joe Judge just kind of blanketed this one way of coaching everybody onto everybody, kind of put this iron curtain down on top of the entire team and said, this is the way things are run, fall in line or leave. And that's actually a very similar quote to something that we heard, because I believe James Bradbury said that about, who was it? Maybe it was Janoris Jenkins. It was somebody. There was a player that somebody said, if you don't like it, you can leave, because, there was the outside noise from the media and players did leave. Players did kind of get sick of playing with Joe Judge. And hopefully, Brian Daboll doing this a different way, I really hope that players don't get sick of that and they don't leave because of the way that he's coaching. I don't think they will, because it seems like a much more accepting and kind of comfortable environment to be in. And the main reason that I want this kind of school of thought from Brian Daboll as opposed to the Joe Judge one is because we saw the very negative effects of the practice perfect mentality reflected through Daniel Jones last season. Daniel Jones did not take risks. Jason Garrett did not call plays for him to take risks. They wanted everything to be highly efficient, short passes, high completion percentage, accuracy, all that stuff. Go ahead and watch some film from the Buffalo Bills the last 3 years. Brian Daboll is not going to play like that. That quarterback, the new quarterback, whether it's Daniel Jones or next year someone else steps in, they're going to be taking some freaking risks. They're going to be slinging the ball downfield, and they're going to be scrambling out of the pocket. They're going to be basically making their own plays off script, like you've seen Josh Allen do it, like you've seen Patrick Mahomes do it, speaking on Mike Kafka coaching Mahomes over in Kansas City. That's what you're going to see, and that's definitely a huge difference from what Joe Judge had, where his quarterbacks needed to be very specific, right? You didn't want to take risks. You want to do everything fall in line with the structure of the offense. Well, Brian Daboll, I think, is going to embrace an unstructured offense where you kind of make things up on the fly. And I think you're seeing that already with this coaching philosophy. Make some mistakes, throw into those tight windows, throw a lot of interceptions in practice, because that way you're going to know what you can and what you cannot get away with when you're running off script in the offense during the regular season. And I think that's the right approach to take when you're trying to mold a young quarterback who's on his rookie contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's the futuristic approach. And, you want to ease them into that process, but having an established offensive line, there's a lot of factors that come into play with a new rookie quarterback. That's obviously down the line if it were to happen. But the other quote that John Feliciano said also stands out because, like I said, it's like the exact polar opposite of Joe Judge. He went on to say, Dabes wants you to take chances. If something happens, it's all right. It's not all right, but this is the time for it to happen, right? So, like, he's indicating that practice is for mistakes and you learn from those, and it's the time to make those mistakes. There's no reason in punishing grown men in hindsight, knowing now what we know and seeing how that doesn't work. But like you said, it does work for some teams. I just think there has to be respect already existing for the coach, for players to buy into that mentality. You know what I mean? Like Bill Belichick, and let's not act like discipline is the only factor that makes Bill Belichick amazing compared to Joe Judge. Bill Belichick has a genius brain. He is a genius head coach, right? He knows how to get, like, the Patriots, by most accounts, are not good at drafting. They get so much value out of players who should not be good. You know what I mean? Like their drafts every year, they take like shots in the second, third rounds. You're like, what? Those guys were 5th, 6th round grades, but they somehow get unbelievable value from these guys. Mac Jones as a rookie, what he did last year as a rookie, nobody saw that coming. Only Bill Belichick in the Patriots system could get the most out of him. Because they bring in personalities and they bring in guys who fit their mold, and they have a very specific strategy. Now, I think Joe Judge came here, tried to force a strategy onto players that may not have liked that and may not have been used to that. And I think it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and ultimately it got him fired. So, and not to mention the QB kneel or the QB sneaks on 2nd and 3rd down to end the season. That was just the nail in the coffin at the end of the day. But I'm excited to see how this team develops. And that's not to say, by the way, that Daboll's process is going to work. We don't know. It's too early to tell if that friendly, family-oriented approach is going to get the most out of this team. By most accounts so far, the offense has struggled in practice. I know they're putting together a new system. There's a lot of guys out, but they haven't been good. Wink Martindale's been putting a lot of pressure on them. And Feliciano actually said something about that too. He said, if there's any defense you want to be facing in practice, it's Wink Martindale's, because his is going to test you every single snap. And he's like, it's actually annoying how much they blitz, how aggressive they are. But if you can bait that off, that defense in practice, you're going to be pretty damn good in live action against other teams. So I think it's an iron versus iron, or iron sharpens iron mentality. I'm very excited to see how this team continues to progress. Joe Shane did mention yesterday on the NFL Irish podcast, I believe it's called, that he is a little bit anxious about some of the injuries. That, you know, essentially he isn't sure how many of these guys will be ready for training camp, or it's coming up in about a month here, a little bit more than that. So definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll keep you guys covered with any injury updates, of course. But Anthony, any last words on you know, the transition to Brian Daboll?
I think I'm really excited for the transition to Brian Dable. I love what he's implemented thus far. And really, I've started to do some kind of deep dives, looking at film here and there, looking at what some analysts are saying about this offensive scheme. I'm getting really excited for it, and I think we all should be. It's going to be a spread offense. It's going to be a lot of passing. Their running scheme might not be too special, but Saquon Barkley's special, so that probably makes up for the scheme there. It's going to be an improved offensive line, and one of the things that I'm super excited for is to hopefully see Saquon Barkley return to form in the passing attack. Get him involved in the receiving game. I think that's going to be the X factor of the Giants offense, is the running back out of the backfield, and I'm super excited for that. I love what Brian Daboll's implementing from a scheme perspective. You all know, if you've been following this podcast for a while, he was my number one choice for the head coach position. I wanted him because of his schemes. I really enjoyed what he could bring to the table in terms of an offensive passing scheme. So I'm super excited to see what he implements. And thus far, I think him and Joe Shane, who completely fixed the Giants salary cap overnight, they've done an excellent job. And I think the culture here is pretty strong. I know that's kind of a buzzword that not everybody likes to hear. And I know that I was the former leader of the Joe Judge fan club. I loved him. I bought in. He got a lot of us to buy in, and it ended up kind of being a scam. But I think what Brian Daboll's doing, he's doing it the right way. He's younger. The team is young, and he's building it with synergy with him and the general manager, Joe Shane. We always knew there was going to be synergy there, and I think that's something that we should be really excited for, is the way that those two are very clearly connected and formulating a very clear vision for this team. So I'm super excited for Brian Daboll. Can't wait for training camp next month, and I can't wait to cover it here on Fireside Giants.
Absolutely. And guys, if any of you guys want some stickers, I just got a whole new batch. Been waiting for them to come in. Finally got some. If you want some, DM me on Twitter, Instagram, and I'll you know, send me your address, and I'll shoot you guys over a couple stickers. I'll actually have them right here so you can see what they look like. Pretty cool. So little FSG stickers. Throw them on your laptop. I actually got one on my laptop right now, or your fridge, or your girlfriend's forehead, wherever you want to put them. But I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode, my friends. Make sure to like and subscribe. As always, much love. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.